Welcome to the Positive Deviance Academy. My name is Sarah and I'm a social innovation expert. You may be curious what social innovation is, and I'm sure there is a textbook example of what it is. But what it means to me is looking at ideas, concepts, and opportunities that impact us socially, as a collective, as a population, or even just as a small group gathering in our neighbourhood area. I've been in this space for about 20 years now. Actually, a little over 20 years if I'm being honest. And I think what that's given me is the unique opportunity to gather some perspectives, concepts, and ideas. And that's what I want to do, is share those with you via the Curiosity Engine. Now, curiosity gets a bad rap as adults. And I disagree with this very strongly. Curiosity is not just childlike behaviours. It's something that we're born with. It's something that we have naturally. But society tends to tell us that it's not the most mature approach. That asking questions means that you're not the most knowledgeable person in the room. And again, I disagree with that really strongly. So in the Curiosity Engine, you're going to learn a set of tools, and these tools are going to help you explore yourself, learn a little bit about what motivates you, what's important to you, and how to find those connections within other people, within other organizations, potentially some government projects that are emerging, and being able to identify opportunities through that lens. I'm going to introduce you to a concept that I'm going to use a lot in the Curiosity Engine, and that is for the data. When I say for the data, it means let's look at this through many different perspectives, many different lenses, and let's apply curiosity to those. Because when we bring it back, we're going to have a lot of data. And the more perspectives and the more curious we've been able to be through this process, the richer that data is going to be. And don't worry, I'm going to give you lots of tools to help you analyze the data, to help you come up with the correct problem frame, to help you understand what people are saying and what might motivate them behind that as well. How to take what is just venting versus what people are actually trying to say, and how their values are showing up in that particular moment. So welcome to Positive Deviance. Welcome to the Curiosity Engine. I'm so excited to get to know you, the problem that you're trying to solve, and let's come up with some amazing solutions together. So before we talk about methodologies, frameworks, and tools to enable ourselves to have successful innovation, I wanted to pause for a minute and reflect on why innovation may fail. Because there's never a lack of ideas. In fact, it's almost like we have an abundance of ideas. But from my experience, those ideas fail because of three key areas that they've not considered as part of the solution. The first is that we've ignored the culture. Now, this might be that we've not considered culture completely, and it might also be that we've not considered all elements of the culture. And when we go to implement, the culture will immediately reject that, because culture is where people can go and feel like they understand where they sit within that culture, and there is a relative feeling of success within that culture. And if we disrupt that without considering the consequences of that, people are immediately going to reject it. Now, the second is using the wrong tools. We might have a great idea, but we've so gung-ho in implementing this idea, we've not considered the right tool to implement it. And again, the culture will just completely reject that. It might be that we've decided that we're just going to completely change how things operate and not given people the opportunity to consult or be involved in the solution to this problem. And suddenly we're enforcing these new ideas and strategies that people don't feel connected to. And if we have that sledgehammer approach, immediately people's first reaction is, well, I don't feel part of this. So the answer is no. And it might not be as overt as that. They may be extremely covert in the way they reject this. But either way, it will implement whether or not this idea will be successful or not successful. And the last is that we've not considered people's values on that journey. And this could look like we've come up and we've talked to people, but we've not actually heard what they have to say. We've listened to the words they've said, but not what's important to people. And often this is the one that is most overlooked, because whenever we come up with opportunities for people to contribute and we don't involve them in the solution, or they don't feel invested in the solution, then they're not going to support the implementation of the solution. Because the simple fact is this: innovation is culture. And our ability to succeed or to not be so successful will be based on culture. And I'm very careful when I use the words succeed or not be so successful, because it's not pass or fail in innovation. Failure is when we pack up our tools and we go home because it's all got too hard. Often, innovation is a little bit like a sailing boat. We're always looking to see what the wind is doing, where our sails are, where other boats are in the ocean with us, and we adjust our sails accordingly. Sometimes we might be sailing along other people. Other times we'll be going in a completely different direction. And what is going to guide us is that culture. So based on your culture, and a lot of what the innovation playbook will give you is measuring our culture. We start with ourselves, and then we also look at those around us. How are we representing ourselves when we present? Because every time you speak to somebody, every time you have a conversation with somebody, they are telling you what is important to them. I'm going to give you a set of tools to help you identify this. I'm going to give you a set of tools that's going to help you project that onto the culture, to other organizations that you could potentially collaborate with, other countries that you could potentially look towards as thought leaders, or they may have a concept that you think might work well for you locally, and they may have implemented it on a grand scale and you want it on a small scale. Or what is often more frequent than not, somebody's implemented something on a small scale and you could make that bigger. And a lot of that is understanding ourselves, understanding the culture we're working within, and then choosing the right implementation strategy. So based on this, I'm going to recommend one of three things: disruptive innovation, relational innovation, or regenerative innovation. And understanding that culture first is going to help us determine the best implementation strategy. But don't fear, because this framework is flexible enough that, just like with the sailing boat, if we go in hard with the disruptive innovation and it doesn't land, then it's okay, because we've got two other tools in the toolkit that we can quickly adjust with. It needs to be flexible, and our implementation practice is not going to be a cookie cutter approach. Cookie cutters, they have their time and place, but very often are we facing a uniform problem and which requires a uniform solution. We need to be flexible. We need to be that sailing boat, and we need to understand all of the tools in our toolkit to help us implement under the right conditions with the right strategy. So if there's anything you've taken from this, it's that innovation is culture, and culture will determine whether or not we succeed or whether or not we have to try again. So before we get too far down the rabbit warren, I really wanted to pause and reflect on some inspirational frameworks that have absolutely inspired me as part of Positive Deviance Academy, as part of the Curiosity Engine, and even in my own individual practice. Because Positive Deviance isn't about reinventing the wheel. Often it is about embracing concepts and ideas that already exist, fine-tuning it, understanding it, implementing it, learning from it, challenging it, and then marking our own footprint on top of that. And so I would never take credit for other people's work, especially when they've inspired me as much as they have. If you're interested in some of the frameworks that have inspired me, feel free to pause the video, take some notes, investigate yourself, because these are 6 amazing pieces of work that absolutely deserve the credit and inspiration. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about classical pragmatism, which is something that I apply in an academic sense. And again, pragmatism gets a bad rap, just like curiosity. But pragmatism to me just means that we are curious enough to take an idea or a concept and then implementing it ourselves, learning, experimenting, playing around with it until we feel confident enough to say, yes, this works. And I think classical pragmatism absolutely is something that you should embrace as part of your own practice, because to stay relevant, to stay on top of things, because society changes so quickly, we need to reflect on frameworks, on ideas, on concepts, and critically analyze whether or not it could help us on our own journey. So I would just like to pause for a second and honor the amazing work that has absolutely inspired me throughout my career. So what is the Curiosity Engine framework? Well, it's made up of 5 really important parts. The first is where we do a deep dive within ourselves. We're going to play the values game, which is where we learn what is important to us and how we present that to the world. Because every time we talk to somebody, every conversation we have, every time we write something that has even a remote amount of passion within it, we are subconsciously telling people what is important to us. So in this, we're going to learn about ourselves, but we're also going to learn about how to identify that in others and how to capture that as part of the data. Because when we understand what's important to people, we can truly focus on the right solution because we're understanding the problem. In the third, we're then going to start looking at a concept of playing with metaphors. Now, I get it. I'm introducing a third socially unacceptable term, which is the concept of adults playing. But again, if something comes naturally and it's not harming others, then I don't necessarily perceive that to be a bad thing. And the concepts of adults playing may be shunned at a face value. But what that might actually look like is creating opportunities to simulate a solution. It might be coming up with an idea or a change in process and filming the current process from A to Z, and then filming the new concept from A to Z in a safe environment where it hasn't been implemented officially, where people can actually see the changes from the way that things are done now and the new way of things being done without it being confronting. And that is the concept of playing. And so understanding metaphors, which is a way of deep diving into the values that we that are important to us and how we present that to the world, we then create what I call the metaphor. And that is how we act. It's how we present to the world. And it also gives us a non-confronting way of identifying how we may react to a new idea or concept. Because it's not about how Sarah will react. It's about how my metaphor would react, which removes the personal touch from that. And that makes it less confronting and therefore easier to embrace. And if we can apply those rules to ourselves, then we can also use that for the people that we're designing for as well. Now, the fourth is the outlier scan. And the outlier scan is really about finding opportunities to look globally at who else has solved this problem. And it's challenging you to look at it through non-logical ways. So for example, if I'm in healthcare and I have a problem I'm trying to solve, the obvious answer would be to look at how others in healthcare have solved this problem. And that may work. But what if we look at amusement parks and how they've solved a similar problem? It's a completely different problem, but the solution or the values behind it may be really similar. And it will give us a different and unique perspective that we wouldn't have got if we had just gone like for like. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be times where I tell you to go like for an innovative solution. But most of the time, I'm going to ask you to expand your horizons and to challenge yourself to think differently and think bigger. Or look at small solutions that people have already implemented that work well and make it bigger. Because using that concept of play and coming up with ways to reasonably predict how it's going to land and how people are going to perceive it are really vital to that process as well. So to wrap everything all up nicely in a bow and to summarize and give you an introduction to Positive Deviance Academy, to the Curiosity Engine, to introduce you to social innovation, you'll walk away with what I like to call the Deviance Blueprint, which will give you an idea or concept of where to go to next and what that's going to look like. So, welcome to the Curiosity Engine, and I'm so excited to see what we achieve together in this process.